Hello, this is me talking to the camera. So I'm just currently doing this video because today has been one of those days I've been reading through some fairly nitty-gritty um, notes on a particular idea called second quantization. Um, and physics when it gets um, very detailed, um, and where you're staring at an equation for ages and struggling to make sense of it can at times be a slightly demotivating discipline. And recently I have uploaded a video talking more technically about the struggle of physics. This is more of a, I wouldn't say necessarily personal, but more of a human to human, if you like, um, discussion of how to overcome the challenges of learning physics. Because physics is one of those things where even if you find it natural, at some point you are going to stumble across something, and that thing is going to be challenging. That thing is going to require a lot from you, including dedication, including time, um, and including patience above all. I think the most important thing in physics, arguably the most important thing in any pursuit, to be honest, is patience. Because all pursuits come with hills. The challenge with physics is you don't necessarily know when that hill is going to arise, because you can't visually see the landscape of physics before you. Even if you plot the topics in physics out in a mind map, um, you're still not going to be able to predict everything that's going to happen, and much of those things in the mind map are abstract concepts, and you can't really know whether challenge will be in learning those concepts until you attempt to learn them. So physics comes with a whole host of challenges. I think, I think it gets easier over time, definitely, because one has more scaffolding in place to help support that climb. But initially, it is a challenge. And I think particularly if you're trying to learn it outside of a structured course, such as if you're learning it after you have been to university, um, it can be quite tough. And to show some of the stuff I was working on today, it was panels just falling on the ground. Beautiful demonstration of the curvature of space-time. That wasn't quite what I was doing today. Today I was doing this, writing these notes, probably showing it back to front. Well, okay, it's going to show it back to front, but the main difficulty was if you could see all those commas. Yeah, all those commas. There are functions like this function here with lots of components, lots of labels, and it was just very visually difficult to keep track of what that function was, particularly as it was looking at exploring an operator acting on that function in both coordinate dependent and coordinate independent representation, and coordinate independent representation of operators is something that I am still getting used to, because, well, when I think of geometry, the first thing that comes into my head is a coordinate system. So, and also because algebra is so linked to geometry, trying to think about an operator external to a coordinate system, particularly the kind of operators you use in quantum-based things, that's, for me, tricky. For me, it's not a natural thing. Even though I understand why it's being done, I understand the importance of it. And I think one thing to push through the difficult times in physics is remember the importance of what you're doing for what you want to learn. You might get stuck at an equation, but remember, as you are going through that equation on the 10th attempt, that you are aiming to achieve an understanding, and it's good to have a goal in mind. One of the difficulties I often have is because I'm kind of curious, I'm inventing words now, because I'm kind of curious about nigh on everything. It's very hard to have that kind of clear focus in mind. Just realised I've got a green label. I think it was from a supermarket where they were doing individual apricots. Quite nice. Recommend lots of fruit during the winter times, but as you can see, another challenge I have when learning is I am incredibly easily distracted. Again, it's the nature of science. One finds fascination and curiosity in everything, meaning anything can potentially be a distraction. But, one way I find helpful to get around that kind of stuff is music. Audio books in the background. I don't know if anyone has their own, playlist. I've heard some people use those. That can be helpful. Personally, I find playlists very distracting if they're music-based audiobooks, particularly if I've listened to the audiobook before, that can be helpful. I would heavily recommend, if you want to have, an audible experience, is to use Libro instead of Amazon Audible, because Libro is arguably better for independent bookshops and for small authors. And by small authors, I mean authors who are not so famous that the constraints of the Amazon ecosystem, that those constraints, are not going to play a huge role in how easy it is for them to survive as authors. So, recommend Libro. But I find audiobooks helpful. Another thing, which is particularly relevant now, is sometimes you'll really want to study something and you'll get a cold or something. Like right now, I'm trying desperately not to sneeze because I've been sneezing a lot today. But I really want to do something that doesn't have me sneezing. When you're trying to write and you feel an urge to sneeze, it's one of the most frustrating feelings in the world. But for that, just have always some tissue at hand. I would also say, particularly at this time of year, drink lots of hot things. Tea will do wonders. If you're in the United States, probably decaffeinated coffee, unless you happen to be living very close to a tea shop. decaffeinated coffee is a good second option. And also, I would say if you do all those things, you've tried playlists, you've tried audiobook, you've got kind of tea or decaffeinated coffee, and you're still struggling, I would say go out for a walk. Switch off the academic brain for a moment, or at least just let it relax. I kind of feel like sometimes learning physics is much like trying to cook the perfect roast chicken, which might sound a strange analogy. In fact, it is a strange analogy, but I think it's true in the sense that when you roast a chicken, you put the chicken intentionally under high heat for a while, but then you take it out and you let it rest. And when it rests, that's when it really brings out its flavour, it relaxes, and it's much more enjoyable to eat after it's had some time to relax. Similarly, with physics, you want to go through periods where you're really thinking hard about it and really persevering and building that kind of patience with yourself and your understanding. But then after a while, it's good to take some time to let those thoughts naturally evolve, develop. And often you'll find that if you go for a walk, lo and behold, 30 minutes later, the solution will come to you. And it's worth saying the solution in physics often evades you, not because the solution is complicated, but because the solution is both simple and referring to a aspect of the physics you may have overlooked. And the combination of those two things means when you're looking for a really complicated answer to do with the things you've spent, hours focusing on, you're unlikely to come across the solution. And linked with that is do try, if you can, the practice problems or make up your own. For this YouTube channel, I try to create my own questions and problems, and that but you don't have to have a YouTube channel or create YouTube videos to do that. I would just say if you think there's a really cool question you would like to answer and you feel you have the kind of physics you need to at least roughly model the problem, go for it and see what you end up with. It's also a good place for seeing how different parts of physics link together and how far you can push certain models. For example, the idea of a harmonic oscillator it can be pushed in certain ways to extreme degrees, far beyond where one would think it should work. Like a harmonic oscillator is strictly about, roughly speaking, a system that is in motion but always trying to return to its equilibrium position. So the force is always trying to return it back to an equilibrium position. So examples are the metronome. Another example is a mass oscillating on a spring, and there are many other examples. But you can take this idea and you can apply it to solids to learn about thermal conductivity. You can apply it to molecules of gas to learn about global warming. You can even apply it to the subatomic particles that make up protons and neutrons in the nucleus of atoms to learn about the dynamics of the protons and neutrons. So, you could stretch it far past the classical realm where it was originally formulated. However, if you try to take the classical simple harmonic picture and apply it to, for example, the heat capacity of gases as you change the temperature, you run into an issue. That issue I'm not going to go over in this video, but you do run into an issue. Equally, the heat capacity, equally the kind of the simple harmonic oscillator model, struggles with a large array of things, including strongly curved space-time. There are plenty of places where the harmonic oscillator model wouldn't work, but there's many places where it does. So by creating questions, you get to explore these things. And the last thing I would recommend, I probably mentioned it, but is exercise and something creative. Take breaks from mathematics and make sure that your body, your physical body, is at least semi in line with your mind in terms of how much you're using it. Now, exercise doesn't have to be doing 100 press-ups. I can't even probably do 20 press-ups, so 100 would be a bit beyond me. But, physical exercise. It could be going for a jog that sometimes turns into a run, or going for a full-blown run if you like. But it could also be dancing. It could, depending on the kind of cooking you do, be certain forms of cooking. There are certain forms of cooking that are more physically exertive than other kinds. I remember there was an episode of Bake Off where one of the contestants looked like they were going to do a squat for, I think, nearly the whole baking challenge, which is one way of exercising, though I wouldn't recommend that posture when baking or doing any form of cooking. But cooking can be a bit of a workout itself. You can find ways to exercise in a fun way. You could even play with cats. They'll definitely give you plenty of exercise if they're in a playful mood. If they're not in a playful mood, you'll get, very little benefit out of trying to exercise with them. They might purr at you pleasantly, but that would probably help you go to sleep rather than exercise. But anyway, my main take home with kind of learning physics or any academic pursuit is to have a clear goal, relax the mind, balance the mind and body, and also probably worth saying, do try to engage with kind of forums and other kind of communities that might be able to discuss or help with some of the material you are studying. It's worth saying, if you've been to university and graduated the Institute of Physics, I think, you are almost guaranteed access to if you've done physics, and I would say also if you've done something like engineering, probably the Institute of Physics. I can't say for sure, but I would be surprised if you can't get some kind of membership with the Institute of Physics. But there are plenty of other forums too. But anyway, I hope that has given you some good tips. I myself am about to, I'm debating because of my kind of minor cold whether to have a hot drink or go out and exercise. It's a tricky one, but I've got this really warm, lovely kind of like cardigan thing, which I love. For those of you who are interested, I'm not being sponsored to say this, but uh, you can get it from Primark. But it's really good. It's kind of like halfway between a jumper and a coat. It kind of traps heat like a coat, but it's quite light, much more like a jumper or a fleece. But anyway, wishing you a brilliant week ahead. Keep going with the physics, but remember to have some downtime too. And I look forward to sharing with you some more wonders of the universe before too long.